Hey everyone, welcome to Character Day 2016. It is a great pleasure to be here. I'm Ken Goldberg, professor at UC Berkeley, and I'm here with Sal Khan, the founder of Khan Academy. Sal, thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here.
I want to tell everyone online that if they want to weigh in with questions on Twitter, we have a hashtag Character Day 2016. We'll be monitoring that, and I'll get interrupted if there's some interesting questions that people want to add. But we only have 20 minutes, so I want to jump right in with you, Paul. I want to say that when I told my students that I was doing this with you, there was a huge reaction. Everyone was smiling. You are really a hero for a whole generation of kids, not to mention parents, teachers. And I'm curious from your own perspective, what are the character strengths that you feel are strongest for you personally?
Character strengths that are strongest for me. I would say, and this one could be a positive or a negative. I can be stubborn at times. So, and I try to moderate it when I feel like I'm being stubborn for no good reason or for a bad reason. But obviously, that stubbornness can lead or can be a factor in kind of perseverance or resilience, which is really important because when you look at something in hindsight or you read a magazine article about something that got done, it looks like it was fairly straightforward. Oh, someone decided to do something, it just happened. But most of the time, there's a lot of bumps in the road. There's a lot of things that kind of knock you down. A lot of times where you're not necessarily feeling confident and so you need a little bit of that stubbornness or that resilience to kind of power through sometimes. So yeah, that's definitely the thing I have to keep in check the most, but I also maybe it's
yeah, I like the terms tenacity, grit. Yeah, because that's absolutely, I agree with you. I think for me, it's like patience is one of my weaknesses. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I find that that's the one that I really need to work on.
That you're too patient or not patient enough?
No, not patient enough.
Yeah, no, I think that
relates to your point about stubbornness. Okay, so listen, with the one thing I'm excited about is I've just been reading up on the lab school and the experiments that you're doing there. And I want to know a little bit more about how this brick and mortar experiment is working out in terms of having a actual school where kids, what I've read about is Montessori 2.0, if you can say more about that, and then how also the co-mentoring, kids teaching other kids is going.
Yeah, the big picture why we even started a school, and it's a separate organization from Khan Academy. We're in the same building, a Khan Lab School. It's a separate 501c3 nonprofit, was from the beginning, I never imagined virtual or digital learning to somehow be a replacement for physical learning. I always thought that they should be hand in hand. And I'd spoken a lot about it, written a lot about it, how using tools like Khan Academy classrooms could become more interactive from a human point of view. So more conversation, more projects. You can start to differentiate or personalize for where students are. And a lot of people agreed with it on an intellectual level, but it seemed somewhat utopian to them in terms of actual implementation. And so that's where maybe a little bit of the stubbornness kicked in. So no, it can actually be done. And it's not like we were the first to try this. There's a lot of schools that have done different aspects of this. As you just alluded to, Maria Montessori experimented with a lot of these ideas, over 100 years ago. You had, Winnetka, Illinois, they did things like mastery-based education roughly 100 years ago. And it seemed like there's an opportunity to revisit a lot of these ideas, especially with a lot of the new tools we have and a lot of the new needs we have out in society. So yes, we have a school. It's ages 5 through 13. We're going to expand into high school age students next year. The students, what's interesting, there's no traditional grades. The students, as they progress on content, on subject matter, they are assessed, but the assessment isn't to say, hey, you're an A student or a B student. It's to say, hey, okay, this is where you were last time. This is where you are now. Let's reflect on it. Are things on track? Are things not on track? What could you do different? And that progression on academics is independent, or I could say it's a different dimension than students' progression in independence and metacognitive traits. And so you could have a student who's racing ahead in, say, math, who's maybe roughly at grade level in reading, but maybe is still needs a little bit more hand-holding in terms of kind of goal setting and stuff like that. Or you might have a student who's remediating in math, but very can self-regulate and is able to meet their goals and things like that. So one way to think about it is in traditional school, I mean, there's a lot of things we're playing with, but in traditional school, you hope that a lot of the character strengths and metacognitive traits happen as a byproduct of going through the, okay, I'm gonna do homework tonight and I'm gonna study for this test, and you do learn. I mean, we all learned, I think, hopefully some really good metacognitive traits, but it wasn't explicitly part of the curriculum. You know, if you look at the Common Core standards, you don't see a lot of like, this skill is to improve the student's perseverance or to improve their patience or whatever else. But over here, we actually call it out as part of the graduate profile. We have explicit rubrics that try to measure these things and try to progress students. So yeah, there's a lot going on. It's personalized. As you alluded to, there's a lot of students helping each other. So if one student is a little bit more advanced in their mathematics, he or she might peer tutor another student.
That's really interesting, because this idea of teamwork, if you will, that character strength, is very interesting in regard to, I mean, what I've always found is that if you really want to learn something, teach it. I mean, that process will really reinforce it. You realize if you can't explain something, you don't quite know it. So I'm curious to what degree the students are teaching each other, and in the sense that they're actually becoming future possible tutors and creators of videos for Khan Academy.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The best way to learn something better is to teach it, or to make sure that you really understand it. And yeah, we try to emphasize that with the students, and not only will it allow them to learn the material better, but it builds this really powerful communication skill, empathy skill. You know, even if you know something, how do you communicate it so you don't make the other person stressed out or nervous or tense? So that is something, and you know, and the school, it's a lab school, so we're constantly trying to push the envelope on how much we can do that. Even at the Khan Academy level, you know, we don't have this on Khan Academy today. On Khan Academy Day, if someone asks a question, someone else can come and answer it. But I do hope that in 5 or 10 years, there's ways for the millions of students on Khan Academy to also be able to do similar things. And then maybe we can recognize that. You know, right now, you oftentimes get recognized based on your test scores or, you know, your GPA. But I would be more impressed by a student who's rated as the top tutor in a subject. That's the person who really has, not only has mastery of the subject material, but also has all of these meta cognitive traits around empathy and communication, whatever else. That'd be really powerful.
Right. Actually, in Stack Overflow, there's the concept of you have a reputation based on how quickly you answer other people's questions and how well they rate you. Ideas, really, people take that very seriously. It's a great sort of peer-to-peer social network that has really grown. Let me ask you about this in terms of the character strengths of curiosity and zest. One thing that's interesting to me is that this Khan Academy goes beyond like the assignments that students usually have, right? They have homework, they have readings, they have a number of things, but it's that initiative to go out and say, I'm going to learn something beyond what was taught in class. I mean, this is what's so interesting, is that you provide all these resources, and kids find them, and then they do this, and it's outside of class. And I'm curious about, do you think that is adding to this availability, enhances their initiative, their sense of zest, if you will?
Yes and no. I think, you know, as you mentioned, we have a ton of stuff that isn't formally part of a curriculum. We have Pixar in a box. We have a section I think is called Math for Fun and and adventures. You know, we have things like, you know, we have a lot of just current event topics in economics and history and civics. And so that's there, and a lot of people access it. But a lot of what we try, because most learners are part of a traditional system, and so they at least come to Khan Academy oftentimes saying, oh, I got to do my homework tonight, or I got to study for a test tomorrow. And what we try to do is, okay, there's that subject that you need to learn for class, so it's factoring a polynomial or acid-base titration, whatever it might be. One, we try to show you that almost every one of these academic subjects are fascinating. I mean, at one point in history, this was someone's passion, and it probably still is. And to at least show them that, because these actually are mind-blowing concepts. And it's actually cool that, you know, for hundreds of years, people have struggled with this, and we kind of get the answers. And sometimes that, you know, that makes people not appreciate how cool a lot of this stuff is. So we try to give a little bit of that. We definitely, you know, a lot of times in traditional classrooms, there's not time or space to go into the proofs or see how things are connected. We try to do as much of that as we can, because there's infinite time and space. And if someone's curious, they can just go. So yeah, we try to, people will come oftentimes for the traditional academic things. We try to make that as interesting as possible, because it is fundamentally interesting. And then hopefully that once curiosity sparks, people might continue on that adventure.
Great. Okay, so that I'm curious because you just mentioned passion, which definitely comes through in the, you know, in your own videos and in the ones that you're there's an enthusiasm that's kind of built in, right? There's an energy. And I'm curious about also there's a playful side I often spot in the lessons. I mean, what is your sense of the role of humor in learning?
Oh, I think it's everything. I mean, humor, it just de-stresses the interaction. You know, any of us, if you're learning something that for the first time, and if it looks a little bit intimidating, it's very stressful. And humor and showing kind of your real humanity, and humor is not only a way of de-stressing the viewer, the listener. It frankly is a good way of just de-stressing the creator. You know, when we're trying to get more people to make videos, and I even do this to myself. Sometimes I have a stressful morning or something, and if I make a video in that mindset, it's going to carry through, and people are only going to get stressed and not like it. So I force myself to smile before videos. I tell myself, look, don't make a video if you're not genuinely excited about it. I tell the other team members, same thing, like enjoy it, make fun of yourself, don't take yourself seriously. That's the only way that it's going to connect. Now, to be able to do that, to be able to relax, you also have to be prepared. You have to know the material well. But that's actually a good check, because if you're so stressed that you got to like read a script and this and that, then one, the stress is going to carry over, and then you're not going to be able to flow in a way that's natural.
Excellent. Okay. And I'm also curious about the relationship with classroom teachers. So you're supplementing the classroom teacher, and sometimes, for example, the notation or so the way you're presenting may be a little different than the teacher. And sometimes as a professor, I occasionally encounter that someone comes in and they say, well, they do it this way, and it's different than what I taught them. So I'm curious how you think about this in the context of character strengths like social intelligence and gratitude, the relationship with their classroom teachers.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, our goal is to empower, supercharge what can happen in a classroom. We've obviously invested a lot in teacher tools. We partner with we have over 1 million teachers using Khan Academy in some way. And yeah, it's absolutely that. And, you know, what you just described, it could be a problem or it could be a good thing. If, you know, I think there is historically, you know, whatever the underlying concept in math or science and humanities, sometimes people get, oh, well, they use this word versus that word. But at the end of the day, it's representing underlying concepts. So it's good if a student says, oh, my teacher said use this phrasing or use this process, and I saw this other one on Khan Academy or someplace else on the internet. Oh, but they're the same thing. And to get this appreciation that there's multiple ways of covering the same thing. At Khan Academy, we do try to cover things in as many ways as possible. So we encourage teachers to say, hey, look, if there's another way of viewing it, we'll make a video, because once again, we kind of have that infinite time and space. And yeah, so we hope that we can give as many resources as possible to empower the student and the teacher, and then hopefully that can free up time in the classroom for deeper engagement, even for the teacher to talk about, you know, how are these different ways of explaining it the same or different. We try to look at standards. We try to talk to teachers and educators and researchers and go with the, I guess you could say the most common ways of approaching a subject. But yeah, I think it's a healthy thing. One thing that we're going to be doing more and more and more at Khan Academy, and I hope teachers keep a lookout for it over the next year, especially for the next school year, we're actually going to make a major effort in teacher-focused content. So I think that'll be a really fun way. And most of it, I think, will be created by teachers, where we're going to be able to really amplify some of the great work that teachers are doing for other teachers.
To say a little more about that, Sal, does that mean that there'll be an opportunity for teachers to actually provide content?
Yeah, and there already is. You know, we're constantly on the lookout for. You know, it's oftentimes teachers, sometimes it's graduate students, sometimes it's just people in industry to make content. It could be video content, it could be exercise content, it could be writing articles. But what we're going to be doing over the next year is a more explicit teacher resources, so that. And it's not just teacher resources on how to use Khan Academy, but it's teacher resources on, hey, if you're covering balancing chemical equations in your chemistry class, hey, here's some interesting projects. Here's some videos of other teachers, how they tackled it. Hey, if you have some ideas, why don't you contribute as well?
Excellent. Okay, that's fantastic. Because I also saw that they just announced the next Breakthrough Junior Challenge. And this is for kids to make content that will be possibly used on Khan Academy. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this is a pretty incredible thing. It's a $250,000 scholarship to go wherever you want. And you make a 5-minute video explaining a concept in math or science, in an interesting way, in a way that kind of opens up minds, opens up curiosity. It doesn't have to be high production value. In fact, most of the finalists last year were fairly, not super fancy, but they had an interesting take on something. And it could be life-changing for students. Last year's winner, has gotten into Harvard, has his full scholarship. His teacher got $50,000. This year's winner teachers will also get $50,000, $100,000 lab for the school. And there's just a ton of recognition. The winners will come to Silicon Valley for this Breakthrough Prize ceremony. The Breakthrough Prize is kind of like this new Nobel Prize for that, some of the leading figures in Silicon Valley have funded to, the people in medicine and biology and physics and chemistry and math making kind of world-changing discoveries. These 13 to 18-year-olds who win the Breakthrough Prize, they're going to be the Junior Challenge are going to be right on the same stage with them. There's a bunch of people from Hollywood. I just did a live stream on Facebook about it yesterday, and I said, and it's true, I bought a tuxedo for this event because this is like the fanciest thing I go to.
Well, actually, it's interesting. My 13-year-old daughter, Odessa, was the one who told me about it, and she was like, "Daddy, can I apply for this?" I mean, it is a great opportunity. Listen, we're probably getting low on time, but I wanted to ask you before I forget a little bit about your own arc of your career. So you started in a hedge fund, and I'm curious about, in contrast to that experience, those years while you were there, how do you feel? Do you feel a sense of character strengths, in particular things like optimism, social responsibility, maybe even spirituality, in what you're doing with Khan Academy?
Yeah, and my original career, I started out of college in tech, and I was out here in Silicon Valley working as an engineer and as a product manager and things like that at business school. Then I worked in a hedge fund, and then this whole Khan Academy thing happened, started as a hobby. It's classically things like hedge funds kind of get grouped in this finance bucket, and there's a lot of stereotypes about it, of it being kind of this very cutthroat, very kind of maybe sometimes unpleasant. What you learn when you go into an industry, there's a lot of variety. I mean, there definitely are hedge funds that are super cutthroat, and people, aren't necessarily filling their souls, things like that. I have to say, I mean, I make fun of my old job, but I got very lucky. I worked for a guy, Dan Wool. It was actually me and him in the early days, actually me, him, and his dog. And he actually really emphasized work-life balance. When markets closed, he used to force me to go home and not think about work. He emphasized that our job is to make good decisions, not many bad decisions. And so he emphasized the importance of recharging. And even in my book, I credit him, because Khan Academy wouldn't exist if he didn't give me the time to tutor my cousins and to have this hobby. So, and it was a really intellectually challenging job too, because I was able to, 1 hour I'd be studying a trucking company, the next hour a biotech company, the next hour an energy company. And so there were commonalities with Khan Academy where I had to learn a lot and then communicate it. I would have calls with a lot of management from these different companies to really understand their businesses. But Khan Academy, obviously, for me, that was a really good job. But Khan Academy, obviously, to be able to directly connect initially with my cousins, but then with many, many other folks. Now millions of folks, every day we get letters from people around the world. That's pretty powerful. I mean, just even you saying, hey, your students get a kick out of Khan Academy and found it valuable. You can imagine that feels good. So yeah, I mean, I now consider myself the luckiest person on the planet. I feel like I'm in the middle of a really fun science fiction book. I think we do have a shot, not just Khan Academy by itself, but the whole community. We're at a stage of history where we can make education very accessible. And I think, I dream that in 20 or 30 years, we'll be at the Breakthrough Prize ceremony, at the Nobel Prize ceremony, and there'll be someone who just figured out the cure for cancer and saying, I was growing up in a slum in Brazil, and I found an app on my phone called Khan Academy, and then I learned everything, and that's why we don't have to worry about cancer anymore. And it sounds kind of crazy, but we're starting to get letters from kids, and there's so much potential out there. And if we just let these kids tap into it, it's already amazing to see what they've been able to do. So to be part of that, and obviously we're part of a great team here at Khan Academy. We've had thousands of volunteers help us translate, and so it's just exciting.
Saul, I have to say that is a perfect way to end, because you have just exhibited in the most fantastic way the character strength of enthusiasm, which actually has to be one of the critical ones of all of the 24. And you just demonstrated with that story about the kid announcing that they've solved cancer or something like that. I think that kind of vision and what you've been doing has been fantastic, and you're really exemplifying all levels these strengths personally and everything that you're doing. And I want to thank you from all of us for all the great work you've been doing.
No, thank you. It was an honor to be here.
Thank you, Sal.
All right.